How the U.S.-Iran conflict actually started. To understand why tensions between the United States and Iran remain so explosive today, we must go back more than 4 decades in history. The conflict between these two countries did not begin with modern politics or recent military strikes. Instead, it has roots in one of the most dramatic revolutions of the 20th century, the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Before 1979, Iran was actually one of America's closest allies in the Middle East. At that time, Iran was ruled by Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The Shah maintained strong political and military ties with Washington. The United States supported his government, helped modernize Iran's military, and worked closely with the country on economic and technological development. But inside Iran, many people were deeply unhappy with the Shah's rule. Critics accused his government of corruption, authoritarian control, and suppression of political freedoms. Religious leaders, students, and ordinary citizens began organizing protests across the country. By the late 1970s, these protests had turned into a nationwide movement. In 1979, the Shah fled the country, and a powerful Islamic revolution transformed Iran's political system. The revolution was led by the influential cleric Ruhollah Khomeini, who returned from exile and established the Islamic Republic of Iran. This event completely reshaped Iran's relationship with the United States. For many revolutionaries, America was seen as a symbol of foreign interference and support for the Shah's unpopular regime. The tension exploded later that same year during one of the most dramatic diplomatic crises in modern history. In November 1979, a group of Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took dozens of American diplomats hostage. The hostage crisis lasted 444 days and became a defining moment in U.S.-Iran relations. The images of American diplomats being held captive shocked the world and deeply damaged the relationship between the two nations. Since that moment, diplomatic ties between the United States and Iran have essentially been frozen. But the hostility did not end there. Throughout the 1980s, the Middle East was shaken by another major conflict, the Iran-Iraq War. During that war, the United States indirectly supported Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, as it fought against Iran. From Tehran's perspective, this was further evidence that Washington was determined to weaken the Islamic Republic. The war lasted 8 brutal years and left hundreds of thousands of people dead. Even after the war ended, mistrust between the United States and Iran remained deeply entrenched. By the early 2000s, a new issue began to dominate the relationship between the two countries: Iran's nuclear program. Western governments feared that Iran was secretly working to develop nuclear weapons. Iran insisted that its nuclear program was intended only for peaceful purposes, such as energy production and scientific research. As concerns grew, the international community imposed heavy economic sanctions on Iran. These sanctions severely damaged the Iranian economy, limiting its ability to trade internationally and access global financial systems. For years, diplomats attempted to negotiate a solution. Finally, in 2015, a breakthrough appeared possible. After more than a decade of negotiations, Iran and several world powers, including the United States, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and China, signed a landmark agreement known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the Iran Nuclear Deal. Under this agreement, Iran agreed to limit its nuclear activities and allow international inspections in exchange for relief from economic sanctions. At the time, many leaders around the world celebrated the deal as a major step toward reducing tensions in the Middle East. However, the agreement remained controversial. Critics argued that the deal did not go far enough to prevent Iran from eventually developing nuclear weapons. When Donald Trump became president of the United States, he strongly criticized the agreement. In 2018, Trump made the dramatic decision to withdraw the United States from the nuclear deal and reimpose severe economic sanctions on Iran. The decision marked a turning point in the modern phase of the conflict. Iran responded by gradually reducing its commitments to the agreement and increasing its uranium enrichment levels. As tensions rose, incidents began occurring across the region. Oil tankers were attacked in the Persian Gulf. Military drones were shot down. Armed groups aligned with Iran carried out operations against U.S. interests in Iraq and other parts of the Middle East. By 2019, the situation had become extremely volatile. Then came one of the most dramatic moments in recent Middle Eastern history. On January 3, 2020, a U.S. drone strike near Baghdad International Airport killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. Soleimani was one of the most powerful military leaders in Iran and commanded the elite Quds force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He was widely seen as the architect of Iran's regional strategy and its network of allied militias across the Middle East. The United States justified the strike by claiming that Soleimani was planning attacks against American diplomats and military personnel. But Iran viewed the assassination as an act of war. Millions of people attended funeral processions across Iran, and the country's leaders vowed revenge. Within days, Iran launched a series of ballistic missile strikes on military bases in Iraq that housed U.S. troops. Although the attacks did not cause American fatalities, they represented the first direct military confrontation between the two countries in decades. The assassination of Soleimani dramatically intensified tensions across the region. Since then, relations between Washington and Tehran have remained extremely fragile. Economic sanctions continue to pressure Iran's economy, while Iran has expanded its nuclear activities and missile development programs. At the same time, both sides have engaged in a complex shadow conflict involving cyber attacks, proxy militias, intelligence operations, and military deterrence. Today, the conflict between the United States and Iran is not just a bilateral dispute. It has become a central factor shaping the security of the entire Middle East. And as recent events show, even a single political decision or military strike can push the region closer to a much larger confrontation. The question now facing world leaders is whether diplomacy can still prevent that outcome, or whether the decades-long conflict between Washington and Tehran is moving toward an even more dangerous chapter.